been standing with you, in front of you, but with you these years. I've been a part of this congregation since the mid-90s. Many of you have been here since the 70s. And all of us were taught the wondrous teaching on giving. And what I think is quite disturbing is not only do I see a lot of people who were taught properly. This is one of the reasons why I told you when I was in the book of Jude, it's so important. People that come in and they bring ideas with them and they poison the minds of other people. Unfortunately, you've got people who will spin every rhyme and reason. As I said, it's always the same people who are sacrificially giving. It's always the same people who are, they've got all kinds of issues, but they were taught. What do you do when you get into a rut? I just heard 5 people say it at the same time and a few peppered over them. You give your way out of it. It's the people who hold on the tightest who can't get out of the rut because they're so focused on the rut. There is no trust in God. There is no, He will deliver me. And I think it's been said here for as long as I can remember. Your focus is on your hurling rewards into heaven. Wouldn't it be tragic to think you go through life and you take all the shortcuts with God, and you get there. Here it comes. You know I was going to go there. Come on. You get there. You know you've taken every shortcut possible. You've taken every easy way. You've shorted God on every front, and you get there thinking there's going to be some big reward laid up for you. And you find out that the only big reward you might get is a big shovel. Fooled you. But you know what the shovel might be for. You've heard of the store Forever 21. This is Forever KP duty. Yeah, you figure out who you want to cheat here. And don't think you're doing it to me. That's the key thing. I think people think spitefully, they're doing it to me. No. Friend, then your whole frame of reference is wrong. You're doing it unto the Lord. And I wish if I really wanted to say it, but it's so blasphemous, I can't even bring myself to say, you're cheating God. That's the best way I can say it without being blasphemous. Now, preaching to a congregation every single week is a lot different than, when I used to go into different facilities, and you go and you see people, and you go in, and you can give them what I call a big shot in the arm, get them all boosted up, and everybody's happy, and then you move on. That's why most of the evangelists are always grinning and happy. They don't have to deal with other people's problems. They have their own, they move on, that's it. But being here every single week requires, as I've told you, to stay true to the Word and stay in the Word, and equally to be sensitive when I'm going through the prayer requests, when I'm reading your letters and messages, to really be sensitive and to take those things into consideration as I pray for the Lord's leading on what direction I should go. Even when we're in the midst of a series, I don't mind interrupting the series if I feel led by the Lord to go somewhere else. I've done that before. But I prayed about this the beginning of the week, and as I started to reflect on where I felt the Lord was leading me for today, I realized that a lot of messages that I have delivered over these many years have much to do with being in trial, being in trouble, right? Because that's where we spend most of our time. Might as well be pragmatic here. That's where we spend most of our time as Christians. it's not on the mountaintop, it's usually in the valley, and it's usually seemingly can be one after another after another. Oh, is this ever going to end? But the conflicts, whether they be outwardly or inwardly, I've noticed that depending on the conflict and the circumstance can usually bring about a new prayer habit or a new prayer intensity. Ever notice that? Something that's really quite severe or quite left field will bring you to a brand new level of prayer you never knew was possible, right? It's almost like God knows when you've gotten complacent. And I'm not saying that he dumps things on us necessarily, but God knows when we've gotten complacent to turn up the dial a little bit to make us get back to that intensity. And I think with each test, there is a new intensity level that comes because it's required. You just kind of get comfortable. As I was searching the scriptures, I found something that I thought was helpful, and I'm hoping that it'll be helpful to all of us today on sometimes when life tumbles in, how to. So if you will, turn with me to Psalm 25. And while you're turning there, let me just say that when life does tumble in or things are falling apart, don't say the dreaded words, I must have stepped out of God's will. The fact that you just stepped into something probably means you just stepped in it. And you can take that as a double entendre if you will, but I mean God's will, because usually it is in God's will that we find ourselves in the mess. And I'm not interested in trying to figure out, did I make a mistake? Have I done something inadvertently? Did I do something deliberately? What I love about this psalm, if you have a Bible like mine, the headers sometimes are not good. I actually like this one. The header on mine for Psalm 25 says, a prayer for guidance and protection, a psalm of David. And what immediately catches my eye about this psalm is there's enough in here, there's enough information in here that as I was preparing and studying, I realized that there's some good lessons that the Lord probably wants me to revisit too. So let's dive in. This psalm is one of 9 acrostic psalms in the Bible. Acrostic means that you cannot see it in the English, but in the Hebrew, the first letter begins with, and it goes through the alphabet. This is an almost complete acrostic in the Hebrew. There are a few letters missing and 2 or 3 that are redundant for some reason. But why an acrostic? Why these 9 acrostics? And I'm of the firm belief, except for Psalm 119, as you know, that's a big, giant psalm, right? That takes up lots of pages in your Bible. Except for that one, acrostics were designed to be able to help people memorize. If you knew the alphabet, which most people, even most of us, know our alphabet, but if you know the alphabet, it would help jog your memory to the next stanza. There was no chapter and verse as we have it divided, so it would help to get your memory going to remind you of what's coming up next. That's why there's kind of an anomaly that there's some omissions and some repetitions. Like when you get to the Hebrew letter for R, our English R, resh in Hebrew, resh is repeated twice. I don't know, when you get to that space, do you go, I don't know. But I just kind of wanted to explain what that might be for. The other thing that I kind of noted here of interest, many times we've said it, we've read it, David is called a man after God's own heart. And yet, somewhat interesting, the wisdom, the instruction, the plea, the petition that will help us to press closer comes from this individual that God chose, that was put in a myriad number of situations, that had a number of terrible missteps before God, and yet he's still asking as if, in other words, someone who eventually would become king. He may have been king at this time, but someone who was king, or would become king, you would think would never bring himself to a position of humbling himself to ask for certain things that David never ceases from. And that's what I love, is that if, at first glance, when you read Psalms like this, you recognize that great people of God, starting with David, and you can span the whole Bible, you'll find that often their petitions, their mindset is full of humility, humbleness before God. There is no laissez-faire, at God's mercy. So I would say one thing here. It's possible, because of the nature of what's in here, that David may have penned this perhaps during Absalom's rebellion and revolt. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think anybody is. But the wonderful thing is that we can glean that obviously he had issues, as it seems that he perpetually did, with enemies, people that were after him constantly in one person or another. If I could put a subheader on this, I would put seeking God in the most difficult times, because when you read the whole psalm, which we're about to do, you recognize that there were things going on, and yet David is still seeking, petitioning, and asking. And there's certain things that throughout the whole psalm seem to be a common theme. I'll just say it. One of them is guidance, for guidance. Who doesn't need guidance today? I need guidance. Don't you need guidance? Yes. We all need guidance. So only the fool says, I don't need that. We all need guidance. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. And one might ask, I'm just going to step right in here. One might ask, what would make David say, do I lift up my soul? You read on to the next verse and you realize when he says, oh my God, I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed. Let not mine enemies triumph over me. The lifting up of his soul had much to do, I believe, with the fact that his enemies were after him, and he was very down in his soul. Now, for people who have not experienced that, forget about the cause of being down in soul, or the cause behind it, in this case, is his enemies. Put that aside, and if you've had a time where you've just felt down, we use the word depressed, but if you've just felt down, the first thing, it's like opening up a door into a house. This is the opening of the door when he says, unto thee, O Lord. He doesn't say, I'm going to go find my friend. Jonathan's not there anymore, and this one, I'm going to go find someone to pour out my soul. He says, unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. Oh my God. Take a look at this. Just some subtleties nestled in here. O Lord, Yahweh, Jehovah. Oh my God, Elohim. Interesting that both names of God are peppered in here. And I don't think by mistake. Unto thee, O Lord, unto thee, O Yahweh, Jehovah. And let's just say that Yahweh, Jehovah, the name that will be attached to other names that reveal God's attributes and God's personality, the character of God. But he who is behind everything, the I am, and Elohim, the God of creation. He is pouring out his soul that is pressed down in front of these two names, same God, not different gods, same God. And I don't think it's an accident. Sometimes it's hard to know why the writer would use two different names. Here it seems obvious to me. The God who is, the God who said, I am that I am, and the God of creation, the one who wondrously spoke, and out of those words from nothing, everything. So these two words open up, as I said, a door into the house of this psalm. That is prayer for protection, a petition for guidance. Oh my God, I trust in thee. Isn't it wonderful to be able to start your prayer with, God, I trust you? Instead of, and I'm guilty of this. I'll tell you, I don't point fingers. I'm guilty of this, of sitting down to talk to God, and that's not the first thing out of my mouth. I'm being honest with you. Now, honesty sometimes is a terrible thing because it paints you bad in front of other people, but really, real honesty should make an awareness of what I'm doing before the Lord. And if you're really honest with yourself, you probably do the same thing. Do you sit down and say, oh my God, I trust in thee, I trust you, Lord, right away? Maybe once in a while, right? Come on. What does the scripture say? No liars. Careful now. But what's wonderful is he says, let me not be ashamed. Let not mine enemies triumph over me. And I don't think it was because David was full of pride. I think it's because he realized if God, the I am God and the God of creation, if God didn't take care of his enemies, God would be shamed by his enemies. You trusted in this God who didn't deliver you? This is what I love about just the opening of these two verses alone tell me all about the heart of this man as he begins his prayer. Yea, let none that wait on thee be ashamed. Let them be ashamed which transgress without cause. So don't let anyone who's waiting on the Lord be ashamed. You ever hear somebody say, well, why don't you do something about that? Why don't you get out there and do something? Anybody ever egged you on like that? Huh? Now, don't use this as an excuse, because some of you will. I'm waiting on the Lord. Yeah, that old guy over there, he's 102. He's still waiting on the Lord. Not like that. Waiting actually is an activity. Waiting is not passive and young. Waiting actually requires some heavy-duty faith. Claiming the promise that God will enter in and God will accomplish what he set out to do. That God is for you and not against you. But here's where it gets good. This is what I love about this psalm. Show me thy ways, O Lord. Teach me thy paths. So this verse 4, there's something so great about this. It shows me that David was wanting to be led by God. I don't know how I can say this any better, but I've met a lot of people who do not want to be led by the Lord. They don't want to be taught by a pastor or an under-shepherd. They do not want to be led by anybody. They are their own country, and they're not interested in being led. Go back to the message of the clay and the potter. God will not work with clay that's already hardened, that's taken on its own shape and form. He is the master designer. He's got a design. Malleability in that sense is required. Here, David, who, whether he was, and I believe, by the way, I'll tell you why, I believe he was already reigning king, to condescend and ask the Lord, show me thy ways, O Lord, teach me in thy paths, is quite significant. I think the starting point for every single person, we talk about the new year, people are talking about the holidays and what people do in the new year. Well, I'm going to turn over a new leaf. I'm going to start a diet. I'm going to start attending church. I'm going to start, where's the buzzer for nothing? How about starting today with asking the Lord in a way that suggests from the heart you desire to be led by him? That's the wonderful thing. God gave some prophets, some apostles, some pastoring teachers, all for a purpose, not so that you can do as I do, to the building up, to come to the knowledge of the perfect man, Jesus Christ, that we all come to the unity of the faith. So when we ask, desiring to be led by the Lord, show me thy ways, O Lord, teach me in thy paths, that brings you to the first place of being in the book and being in the Word. Keep reading. Lead me in thy truth and teach me. So not only wanting to be led, willing to be led. There's a difference between wanting and willing. I want something, but I'm not willing to commit my way. And that's, by the way, the breakdown of a lot of the church world, wanting and not acknowledging that most are not willing. And the commitment that is required, this is the silly part, the commitment that is required is not one of relinquishing all of your earthly tastes, ideas. It's one that says, I need to be led, I want to be led, and I'm willing to be led. Lord, lead me. And when the mouth actually says that, the mouth, the mind, and the heart, you bet when you utter those words, you better mean business, because God's going to take you at your word. A lot of people, I have to go back to that clay and potter. They have it in their head. They read it in the book. They have it in their mind. I want to be led. But the minute the idea beyond I am willing to be led, oh, that requires what? That the master's hand be upon me and ever so gently, or perhaps maybe not so gently, press me into the shape he desires. Oh, no, I'm not willing for that. And there's something else here that's really important. In verse 4, let me go back to something. Teach me thy paths, that people be teachable. Okay, I'm going to tell you, I'm super guilty. In my youth, I did this. Because we all go through phases of brief rebellion. Some are not so brief, but we all go through phases. I was, in my skating, old enough to have learned enough things to decide that I didn't want to learn any new techniques. And I wanted to go right straight away from where I was to all the highfalutin stuff, not knowing or not understanding that you have to progress. I guess maybe it's like Dr. Scott when he played the sax and wanted to jump right away to jazzing up, some, I don't think they're sacred tunes, but whatever. But sometimes we don't want to have the patience to be teachable and learn everything in between along the way. We just want to get from point A to point B. Like when people say, cut to the chase, man, right? Like that. Not willing to learn in between, and it's what you learn in between that may prevent an accident. It may prevent, or it may help, it may guide, it may aid, it may a lot of things. It's like trying to build a foundation, trying to build a home and shortcutting the foundation. So I love the fact that what's included in here is he says, teach me in thy path. And the willingness and the wanting to be led and to be teachable. You can't help somebody who does not want to be taught. Lead me in thy truth and teach me. Again, it's repeated there. For thou art the God of my salvation. On thee do I wait all the day. So we have wanting, willing, and waiting on God. And this is a wonderful, as I said, it's a template for guidance, whether you're in a time of trouble or not, to realize that when we say, I desire the Lord's will on something, it requires sitting down and asking, are you willing to be, are you wanting to be, are you willing to be led by the Lord, taught by the Lord? And that includes the hard lessons that may be unpleasant. We've all had those hard lessons. There's some that you wish you never had to go through, but then you wouldn't be where you are if you hadn't gone there. Do you know what I'm saying? Yes, ma'am. Good. Glad I don't have to repeat that 5 times. So you've got an idea there. And he goes straightway from what I've just pointed out to, remember, O Lord, thy tender mercies and thy loving kindness, for they have been ever of old. I'm not doing correction today. I'm just looking at what's there. What do I love about this is thee, under thee, in thee, waiting on thee, thy ways, thy paths, thy truth. Thou art the God. O Lord, thy tender mercies, thy loving kindness. The focus is all on God. Even though he says, under thee I lift up my soul, downcast and perhaps even in despair as I am regarding the people who await to ensnare me, but I look unto you. Are you there yet? Because I think most of us, again, honesty time, most of us spend most of our time talking about me and my. Oh, you don't know what happened to me. Listen to my story. It's those small little words that tell you the focus. Versus if you're going to use those small words, you might say, my God, the God of my salvation, the God who answers prayers, the God who hears, the God who loves me, the God who heals me, the God who sees that I am in trouble and needs him, right? Instead of me and my, and it's all about me. So I love the way this is written. Remember, O Lord, thy tender mercies and thy loving kindnesses, for they have been ever of old. Remember not the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. According to thy mercy, remember thou me for thy goodness' sake, O Lord. So a couple of things. And I'm going to at this point say David, who has all of the credibility behind him as a person in the Bible. And just in these few verses, I recognize that this is a man of great humility. This is a man of great wisdom to ask to be taught, to wanting to be, willing to be, and waiting on the Lord to be led. And he adds to this saying, remember not the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. The interesting thing is we have the New Testament promise that David didn't have, which is by the blood of Jesus Christ, past sins washed clean. By the blood of Jesus Christ, I'm made whole. By the blood of Jesus Christ, I don't have to say, remember no more. For Christ says, for your faith I take you as if you are just like, forgive the simplicity, justified. He is the one who justifies, the justifier. He is the one who does this. But David is saying, remember not the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. And I marvel at this, just this one saying. Why? Because it appears to me that some of us, as we age, and as people get older, they forget something very important. That everything that is behind is covered by the blood. And even the things in the present and even the things yet to come, as long as you remain in the faith. Very important that David, who didn't have the tools we have, is petitioning, according to thy mercy, remember me for thy goodness' sake, O Lord. Good and upright. Here come the catalogs of God's attributes. And it's almost like it's rolling off of his tongue or his pen. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore, he will teach sinners in the way. I love this because what he's doing is saying, for anyone who's willing to be led, taught, wanting to be led, taught, teachable, the Lord will lead, the Lord will guide, the Lord will make a way and provide for you to see and understand, taste and see the Lord is good, that yes, indeed, we all are on this other path. God redirects our footsteps, lights our way, gives us the guidance, and he goes on to say something wonderful. The meek will he guide in judgment, and the meek will he teach his way. This really tells me something about David's understanding about submitting to God. When you say that word today, submitting, it makes people go, oh, because we become such an autonomous, and I don't mean society, but the mindset is, I don't need anybody. Well, you may not need anybody, but you need God. You may not need anybody. I don't know, maybe you can be bodiless. But you need God. Failure to acknowledge this is why I said we're in the trouble we're in, is this unsubmitting society. The meek will he guide in judgment, and the meek will he teach his way. Willing to be taught, I have to repeat this again because it's necessary. Wanting to be taught, wanting to be led, willing to be taught, willing to be led, and waiting on the Lord. And that only comes, let's talk about the meek. The meek is not the wimpy people. It's the ones who understand wearing the bit and bridle, under God's control, not some wild horse out there just bucking around thinking that the whole universe exists for them to kick air at. Just flip your heels and whatever else you think you're going to do out there. No, this is for those who have come under the bit and bridle, recognizing God, indeed, the God of creation, the God who is the I am, the Jehovah, who is my Jesus. He'll teach. They called him in the New Testament Master, Teacher, Rabbi. But God has been teaching his people from the beginning. All the paths of the Lord are mercy and truth unto such as keep his covenant and his testimony. And this is interesting because people will read this and they'll say, that's an Old Testament sting. That's an Old Testament thought process. Well, it is. But all the paths of the Lord are mercy and truth. What did Jesus say of himself? I am the truth. I am the way. So don't try and bifurcate something that has been, that always will be. For thy name's sake, O Lord, pardon mine iniquity, for it is great. Now, leave that somewhere in the back of your brain baggage as to what exactly people have tried to figure out is the iniquity, the killing of Uriah, is it the sleeping with Bathsheba, is it 1,000 other things he did? Who knows? But you know what is remarkable? That such a man would say his iniquity is great. Such a man who was appointed and anointed to such a position, you'd think he would diminish his condition, and yet he didn't. He never did. There's wonderful teaching in all of this. What man is he that feareth the Lord? Him shall he teach in the way that he shall choose. So you see there's a repeated theme here of teaching, learning, and being guided. I don't know why this is such a difficult thing, but it is. I seem to encounter this more often than I share with you, and I think I share it quite often. People trying to make the church something other than a learning place. It's not a place where you come and the pastor stands and condemns you. I don't condemn you. I don't judge you. I've told you that before. The church is made up of 100%, not 99. 100% of the people in the church are really messed up. And I wish I could say the right word. Oh, you carnal ones. 100% of the church, not 99. And it's this age-old problem. People get into the mindset of measuring out the levels of sin and sinfulness. It's all the same. God sees it all the same. He also sees, by the way, when we are willing. You know, I used to think that there was something really easy about this idea of being taught. Just when you think you have learned the lesson, bam, here comes a new one, right? Just when you think you got the thing mastered and it's down like this, here comes a new curve. That's your new learning curve for the week, the day, the month, the year. But you've got to be willing to look at it and acknowledge something. I don't have all the answers, and neither do you. And someone could live their entire lifetime, as I've said, my late husband did this. Oh, you get the basis, the most important, we'll call it the gestalt of being a Christian. But no one can, in their lifetime, can have all the wisdom, possess all the wisdom and all the knowledge and all the things, and say, I have nothing more to learn. Like the man, I think it was a young boy that read every book and said he'd read every book in the library and there was nothing more to learn, but you know, the library was only a little 2x4 area. Sorry, I couldn't help that. The point is, you have to be willing, and I have to be willing. to be malleable. It's a hard, hard, hard thing to do, especially as we get older. His soul shall dwell at ease, and his seed shall inherit the earth. The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant. Now, if time permitted, I would dissect a couple of these verses, but let me just say this to you. The secret of the Lord is no longer a secret. The secret of the Lord is if you'll just trust him. The secret of the Lord is stand on his word. The secret of the Lord is made plain and revealed in Christ. That every single promise in this book is made yes and amen because of him. Therefore, there is no secret. There is no concealment. Some people have translated this word, the friendship of the Lord is with them that fear him. And if that be so, we might say it's communion, the communion with God, the at-oneness. But can you be at one with God when you refuse to be led? You do not wish to be led, you do not want to be led or taught. The answer is no. Can two walk together except they be agreed? And you may say, whoa, whoa, whoa. But that's the way it works with God. This is why you go back to the garden, you see, until a certain time, I'm sure that Adam enjoyed daily walks with God in close proximity. And then all of a sudden, he hid himself and he was alone. You go figure out real quickly, we spend more time in that position than we do walking with the Lord. So he goes back now to a prayer and a petition. This actually goes between prayer and we'll call it meditation. Prayer and meditation. Now we're back to a prayer. Mine eyes are ever toward the Lord, for he shall pluck my feet out of the net. This says something again, just like in the opening second verse when it said, let not mine enemies triumph over me. Here, and he will show them, For he shall pluck my feet out of the net, suggests that David was constantly counting on God to deliver him in every danger that he found himself in. He knew that he had enemies. He knew that his enemies laid a snare for him. He knew the design was to entrap him, to hinder him, to prevent him. And yet he says, mine eyes are ever toward the Lord, for he shall pluck my feet out of the net. He will deliver me. How many Psalms have you read where he says, he will deliver me? Many, right? At some point, I almost think David brainwashed himself. In a good way. He will deliver me. But it wasn't just mere thought because God had delivered him. Remember all the ways the Lord has led thee. Remember all the goodness and all the tender mercies and all the things the Lord has done. So at some point you stop and you say, well, the Lord came through all these other times. Why not this time? Why would this time be any different than the last time? Yet, let me ask you a question. It is rhetorical. Why is it that in the next big challenge that comes your way, which was the last one that you had, did you stop for a second and say, maybe the Lord won't? I don't want to ask you if you raised your hand because most of us end up, about 50% of us end up with that mindset. I don't know if the Lord's going to do this for me. And he's done all these other things for me. What is he, a limited God? Like it's a limited time offer. Oops, you missed it. It expired last year. If God did it the first time, you think back on David's life and all the things that he remarkably went through. I mean, being chosen of his brethren, if nothing else, if there was never a Goliath story that happened, if there was never a Bathsheba story, just being chosen as the youngest of his brothers could cause a lifetime of grief in a family. And if you have discord in your family, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like, oh, God. Can you please deliver me out of this? What? Okay, the point is, if nothing else happened, and David had to live under the pressure of his brothers, constantly chiding him and joking and ridiculing him. Oh, you're the king? You're the chosen one? You're just a boy. You don't know anything. You're just a stupid red kid. that would have been a lifetime of misery. But think about all the things that he actually went through. And each one of them, if you think about it, each one of them is remarkable. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, Goliath couldn't have been that big. Well, listen, suit yourself. He was big enough that a whole army was scared of him. So even if he was a little bit smaller than the description that's given, he was still a big, big guy. And the fact of the matter is what David accomplished there, not coming with Saul's armor, but with 5 stones, actually only really needing one in the name of the Lord, tells you all you need to know about the rest of the life of David. So here is this wonderful thing. He says, you will deliver, you shall pluck my feet out of the net. Turn thee unto me and have mercy upon me, for I am desolate and afflicted. The next time you find yourself in a state of feeling just like that, I want you to go back and find this and remind yourself that you are not the only person that goes through these phases in your life. While it's happening to you or to me, we think we are. We're the most miserable, the most wretched. How could this happen to me? He says, turn thee unto me and have mercy upon me, for I am desolate and afflicted. I highlighted a couple of words here and put some words in my margin to help me out for the next time if I need to remember this. One of them is I underlined desolate and I put in the margin desolate. But the next one, verse 17, the troubles of my heart are enlarged. Oh, bring me out of my distresses. So I put distress right there. The troubles of my heart are enlarged. Desolate, afflicted, the troubles of the heart. Have I described some of the people here today? I'm waiting for someone to say, bingo. Kind of interesting because you're either looking into this book when this comes, or you're looking to the world. And the world's going to have some good Band-Aids for you, but nothing is going to heal the inside. Nothing's going to get to the heart. Nothing's going to penetrate and become the peace which passes all understanding, like the words that are laid out in this book. They are the tender mercies of God that, if applied in need, become salve to make it through. Look upon mine affliction and my pain, and forgive all my sins. I see a very penitent man for whatever he's asking for. I notice that in one place he says to forget his sins of his youth. Here, forgive all my sins. Now he's not just talking about past, he's talking about the present, and possibly, maybe even intending the present into the future, but certainly the present. Consider mine enemies, for they are many, and they hate me with cruel hatred. So we have desolation, we have distress, now we have danger. You know what? I marvel at this psalm because it has so many things to, at least for me, I connect with so many of these things. It says, they hate me with cruel hatred. Look around you and ask yourself, one media personality asked the question, and man, I have yet to see, and I'm not sympathetic with the media, trust me. One media person asked, why has everybody become so hateful and divided? Do you wonder why we're so full of hate everywhere? It's everywhere. It is more and more, increasingly every single day. It is like a disease. And people, forgive me, I still think things like, yes, tobacco kills more people, and you can go on the litany of things, but the thing that's killing the souls of people everywhere is hatred. And no, to educate people is not the cure and end all, because we've been educating people for the last, in this country, for whatever it's worth, with, forget about progressive education. Just look at the last, hypothetically, the last 20 or 25 years, but certainly the last 20 years, where everyone has access to the internet, where it's the information highway, where information is accessible to all. Are we better? Are we less hateful? So education is not the solution that people said it would be. And my point is, and this is why I said, you can see some of this, you can read it, and sometimes you read a psalm and it's just a psalm, and it stays a psalm, and other times you read it and the words come to life. And it says, they hate me with cruel hatred. People are hating now for there is no reason. It's just now part of a group of people. Your political affiliation, your religious affiliation, your social associations make you a target no matter what. It used to be it was just a set group of people over there with class-based animus. Now it's any individual that does not fit the mold and say one word that you should be entitled to say. And suddenly, you are the target of every vicious and cruel word that could be uttered. Now, David, in his day, trust me, he had to have some vicious, cruel people after him, because he writes about this in many different places. But then he says, "Oh, keep my soul and deliver me." These are good things to pray and ask for even in today's climate. Lord, keep my soul, that while I navigate through this cesspool of hatred out there, I'm talking about anywhere that you go in the world, while I navigate it, Lord, keep my soul. Help me to be stayed on you. Help me to have clarity that the things of this earth, temporal, and maybe important for the moment, do not count for eternity, such as people are so ramped up to believe that somehow they're going to make a mark here for something that in 50 years people will say, "What? You did what?" It'll be irrelevant. If you're going to live your life as a Christian, don't entangle yourself with those things that actually, I will tell you, Satan looks to destroy the soul. That's what he's looking for. Why do you think it's so easy? It's easy pickings out there. Without the whole armor of God, without the preparedness and the understanding, people are just targets, and they become casualties of spiritual warfare unbeknownst to them, because there is no war going on. Because everyone will be well and all will be well, ultimately, because there is no heaven and there is no hell. I guess when John Lennon said that, imagine there's no heaven, I think a lot of people bought into that idea. There must not be any place. You just go into the ground and die. And that makes this book a lie. And the promises of Christ, everything that he said a lie, it makes the Jews of the Old Testament damned somewhere, and it makes the Christians of the New Testament damned somewhere. And I refuse to believe that that is a God of creation, or of love, or of all power. So when I put these words out like this, I say to you, the same God who created and spoke is the same one looking after you today, guiding you. And in David's prayer, keep my soul. That's a wonderful, wonderful petition. And deliver me. Let me not be ashamed, for I put my trust in thee. Lord, my prayer is that when I come to you, I start off more and more talking like David and saying, Lord, I trust you with everything. It's all yours anyway. I trust you with everything, with every thought, every decision, every angle of my life. In your hands. I don't place things, they are. Keep my soul, deliver me, let me not be ashamed, for I put my trust in thee. Let integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait on thee. And the last verse is why I said I think that he was already reigning, because it says, redeem Israel, O God, out of all of his troubles. And I think the frame of reference for David was when David was in trouble, so were his people as well. In the New Testament, when one person hurts, we all hurt. There's this attachment as we work as a body and as we work together. I love this prayer because it says, even in David's time of trouble, he found, even at the last, a place to put in praying for others. In the midst of my concern, Lord, don't forget these people over here. We can be selfish and greedy in our prayers and forget, Lord, it's not all about me. I know people who are worse off. You want to know how to get out of your rut? Find somebody who's worse off than you and begin to pray for them in your prayers. There's always a way with God, as long as we're willing to be taught and learn of Him and take the lessons. And why am I kind of pouring all this out today? And really, we just went through a psalm which I feel is a psalm of guidance. It's a prayer of petition, but it's also deliverance from something. You know what the deliverance is from? From the oppression, from what seems to be pressing every single day on every person that I talk to. They'll make a reference to something pressing and weighing them down. Well, God is the God of our salvation. He is the deliverer of souls, and He's the lifter up of men and women. This is why I said it's like opening a door. I lift up, unto Thee, O Lord, I lift up my soul. Downcast though I may be, depressed, feeling like I've been walked on by the earth, by the whole world. Yet, Lord, I lift up my soul to You. You know where I've been. You want me to tell you I know, but I'm going to tell you, but I know that You know. And the fact that you've seen and you know, and through the process, maybe I haven't, not like David, I haven't been praying out and saying these things, but this is a great template for every single person in the sound of my voice to glean guidance, not just in a time of trouble, but guidance for our prayer life, guidance to be more focused and more steadfast, and to keep faithing and to keep trusting Him when everything else is pushing in that says, oh, you don't have time for that, and you won't be able to make it over here because if you don't do this thing, and how will you make it over there? You know those pressures I'm talking about? Where you just feel like everything's coming at you, and how am I going to fix this? How about turning it over to God? Go back into this psalm. And now I go back to the header for a second. Prayer for guidance and protection. And it's the one time where I agree with whoever put the header there. What a great way of approach for guidance. As I said, we all need it. Your pastor needs it. You need it. We all need it. There isn't anybody who's in the sound of my voice who doesn't need guidance. And a reality check once in a while. You know, here it comes. I'm going to ruin a very spiritual moment. You know, it's the reality check when you've had a whole bag of cookies, and you can't fit into your jeans, and you ask your significant other if these jeans make your butt look big. Except your significant other wants to be nice to you and say, no, they're cotton, they shrunk. God says, not interested in the excuses. You know where you're at. It's time to get real. You want my guidance? You got to be able to listen to what I'm saying through my word. I'll guide you. I want to see that you're teachable and you're not perpetually in the excuse mode of saying it shrunk or some other person's to blame. Lord, I have my issues. I need all the guidance. I'm praying for help. I want to be taught. I want to be led. I not only want to be led, I am willing. And I am waiting on You, Lord. And with those three ideas, the whole psalm comes together as something that says, I can use this as a template for my prayer. I can use it as a template for my daily devotions. And I can certainly use it as a tool to get closer to my God. So can you. I hope it helps you. That's my message. I'm Pastor Melissa Scott, pastor of Faith Center, Glendale, California. I teach every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. If you'd like to attend services with us, simply call the 800 number, that is 800-338-3030, to join us. If you'd like to watch, listen, and learn 24 hours a day, simply log on to our website at www.pastormelissascott.com.